they had taken 100,000 in the campaign. It was imperative to the British Army to keep the war fluid, not give the Italians a chance to fall back big in and defend themselves. And so they moved swiftly on to Derna after Tobruk, which you see up at the top, and it fell on January the 30th. As they went around to Benghazi, it was obvious that they had the whole Italian army on the run. And so General Wavell and General Cunningham, who was in command of the forces on the ground, decided that they needed to cut off their retreat. And so they, at the attack on Benghazi, they applied the coup de grace by sending part of the 7th Armored Division from the neighborhood of Derna on the northern coast. And on the coast there is a group of mountains, and I can't pronounce the Arabic name, but they call them, some people call them the Green Mountains. Behind that is just desert, and very desolate, hard desert. One of the writers said no army had ever tried to go through that area. Even the Bedouins stayed away from it because it was just wasteland, and all the tracks led into nothing. And so nobody had ever tried. And the Italians obviously never thought to go that way, to try to get away. And so they, as I said, they attacked Benghazi on February the 9th. And while it was under siege on February the 4th, they sent the 7th Armored to cut off the Italian retreat, and they made a dash across that desert. And they finally arrived at the place on the highway called Bida Farm, if you see that on the west side of the map. A distance of about 200 miles through that desert, and with no roads and rocky desert. And as somebody said, they traveled at night mostly because they could bunch up and travel bonnet to tailgate, as the Brits say, at night. In the daytime, they spread out because if they got attacked by aircraft, they didn't want to be all in a bunch. And so, but they made that in about 30 hours, and they arrived at Bida Farm about 2 hours before the vanguard of the Italian army was to pass by there. And so they caught them, and that effectively ended the Italian threat to Egypt in North Africa. And at the end, the Italians fought fiercely, trying to break out and to get away. And that the fiercest fighting in the whole campaign was in the area of Bida Farm, because it was desperate at that point. They knew they were done for if they couldn't get away, had no place else to retreat. And so, after 2 months, from early December to early February, a half of the 250,000 troops that the Italians had in North Africa, in Libya, half had been either killed or captured. So imagine 125,000 of your troops are gone. As I said, that ended the Italian threat to Egypt. And to have accomplished that with essentially three divisions. There was an Indian division, an Australian division, and the 7th Armored British Division. No more than ever, well, halfway through this campaign, General Wavell took the Indian division and sent it down to the Sudan. Things were going so well, he decided he didn't need them in North Africa, I guess. But the British, the Indian and Australian fighters were well trained, and their equipment was better. The Brits had developed what they called the I tank, I think, which was better armored than the Italian tanks, and the Italian artillery just bounced off of it, and so they were better equipped, better trained, and they had the benefit of the British Navy and the RAF, which the Navy was offshore there in the Mediterranean, and they could bombard all of those port towns, and they did it unmercifully before each battle of all of those port towns. And the RAF was very effective too in that campaign. So why was that not the end of that in North Africa? Well, two things happened. Churchill took 2 divisions and sent them to Greece. And about the time that Benghazi was falling, the Africa Corps was coming ashore at Tripoli. And so almost immediately after this astounding victory, the German army engaged the British army, and in short time had pushed them back into Egypt, even further than the Italians had advanced. You see on El Alamein, it is several, probably 60, 100 miles east of Sidi Barrani, where the Italians had advanced to. And so the victory didn't last very long, but it was an astounding victory. And I heard once that, well, I was visiting Shiloh, and somebody told me that General Rommel had been a visitor to Shiloh back in the 30s. He was interested in the tactics used by the armies in the American Civil War. But it looks to me like the British had caught the flavor of General Forrest, and they were a smaller force, they were faster, and they figured out how to bring their forces to bear on a very short front. And so, moving as swiftly as they did, they simply overwhelmed the Italian army. They couldn't get away fast enough. And so it looked like that the British army was using the same tactics that the Confederates had used to great advantage. Now, a lot of this is recounted in a book called The Desert War, the North African Campaign. It's written by Alan Moorhead, British, Australian, I think, war correspondent. And it's really interesting because he was there. I mean, he moved with the army as it moved around. And he divides this book into 3 phases. And it includes all of the campaign in North Africa. This was the first part. The second part was the ensuing months when General Rommel had his greatest success, up to the Americans landed in November of 1942, and General Montgomery broke out at El Alamein in late October of 42, and that's the 3rd phase of the war. So if you're interested, it's a good resource. But that is Benghazi, 1941.